The GPS lost signal 20 minutes before we reached the campsite, leaving Curtis to navigate by memory and a printed map he'd folded and refolded so many times the creases had worn white. I watched him grip the steering wheel tighter each time we hit another pothole on the dirt road that barely qualified as more than a hiking trail. "You sure this is right?" I asked, peering through the windshield at trees that seemed to press closer with each mile. "Trust me." Curtis downshifted as we climbed another steep grade. "I researched this place for weeks. No crowds, no RV parks, just us and nature." In the back seat, River whined and pressed his nose against the window. Max and Luna had given up looking outside an hour ago, both sprawled across each other in that boneless way dogs managed when they'd accepted their fate. The truck bounced over another rut, and I grabbed the door handle. "When you said remote, I thought you meant like fewer people, not like we're driving to the edge of the earth." Curtis shot me a look that mixed excitement with something else I couldn't quite name. "The apartment hunting wore us both out. We need this." He wasn't wrong. 3 months of viewing overpriced places with paper-thin walls and suspicious stains had left us both stretched thin. But as the trees grew thicker and the road narrower, I wondered if we'd swung too far in the opposite direction. The campsite appeared suddenly. A small clearing beside a river that rushed over rocks with enough force to drown out the truck's engine. Curtis parked near a fire ring made of blackened stones, and I climbed out to stretch legs that had gone numb from the drive. "This is it?" The words came out sharper than I'd intended. "Look at this place." Curtis spread his arms wide, grinning. "When's the last time you heard water that clean?" River bounded out the moment I opened his door, nose to the ground, tail rigid. He trotted to the tree line and back, circling the clearing like he was mapping territory. Max and Luna followed more cautiously, staying close to my legs. The river was beautiful, I had to admit, clear enough to see smooth stones on the bottom, with a deep pool about 50 yards downstream where the current slowed. Mountains rose on all sides, their peaks disappearing into late afternoon clouds. No power lines, no road noise, no neighbors arguing through shared walls. "Okay," I said. "It's gorgeous, but we're really in the middle of nowhere." Curtis pulled our tent from the truck bed. "That's the point. No distractions, no stress, just us." I checked my phone out of habit. No signal, not even one bar. The screen felt useless in my hand, like holding a dead thing. What if there's an emergency? There won't be. Curtis shook out the tent fabric. But I brought the satellite phone, remember? For actual emergencies only. River had wandered to the river's edge, where he stood perfectly still, staring across the water. His ears were pricked forward, body tense like he'd spotted prey. I followed his gaze but saw nothing except trees and rocks on the far bank. "River, come." He ignored me, which wasn't like him. "River." He turned at my sharper tone, trotted back, but kept glancing over his shoulder toward whatever had caught his attention. We set up camp 30 feet from the water, close enough to hear the river but far enough back to stay dry if it rained. Curtis moved with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before, staking corners and adjusting guy lines while I unpacked our sleeping bags. The routine felt good, purposeful in a way that apartment hunting never had. "I'm taking the dog swimming," I announced once we'd finished. "Work off some of that car energy." "Good idea. I'll get firewood." The pool downstream was perfect, deep enough for the dogs to swim, but with a gentle slope where they could wade in gradually. Max and Luna splashed around the shallows, snapping at water droplets and chasing each other in circles. River, though, kept swimming toward the middle, then paddling back with urgent whines. "What's wrong, boy?" I waded in knee-deep, the mountain water so cold it made my legs ache. "What do you see?" He barked once, sharp and clear, facing the opposite bank. Then he swam out again, farther this time, until only his head showed above the surface. His bark echoed off the mountainsides, coming back to us in layers. "River, that's enough," I called. "Come back here." He finally obeyed, but spent the rest of our swim session pacing the shoreline, occasionally letting out low woofs at something I couldn't identify. Max and Luna seemed unbothered, more interested in the stick I threw for them, but River's restlessness made me cut our swim short. By the time we returned to camp, Curtis had gathered enough firewood to last 3 days. He'd also unpacked our camp chairs and the cooler, transforming our little clearing into something that looked almost civilized. "Everything okay?" He looked up from arranging kindling. "You're back quick. River's acting weird. Keeps barking at the other side of the river." Curtis glanced toward the water. "Probably smells deer or something. New territory. Lots of sense." That made sense. But River was trained. He didn't usually bark at wildlife unless I gave him permission. Still, I didn't want to sound paranoid on our first night. We cooked hot dogs over the fire as the sun dropped behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that no city ever managed. Curtis pointed out constellations as they appeared: Ursa Major, Cassiopeia, others I'd forgotten since high school astronomy. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks up toward stars that seemed close enough to touch. "This was a good idea," I admitted, leaning back in my chair. "I forgot how quiet the world could be. Told you." Curtis poked the fire with a stick, sending up another shower of sparks. 4 more days of this. 4 more days. The number sat strangely in my mind, heavier than it should have been. In the city, 4 days passed without notice. Here, with no clocks except my watch and no schedule except sunrise and sunset, 4 days felt like a long time. River lay between our chairs, but his ears kept swiveling toward sounds I couldn't hear. Every few minutes, he'd lift his head and stare into the darkness beyond our fire's reach. Max and Luna had already claimed spots near the tent, curled together in a furry pile. "You really think this place is safe?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Curtis looked at me over the flames. "Safe from what?" "I don't know. Bears? Getting lost? What if the truck won't start?" "Bears are more afraid of us than we are of them. I've got maps and a compass if the GPS fails, and the truck's in perfect condition." He reached over and squeezed my hand. "Stop worrying. That's the whole point of being here." He was right, of course. I was letting city anxiety follow me into the mountains, looking for problems that didn't exist. The fire was warm, the stars were brilliant, and we had everything we needed. I forced myself to relax, to enjoy the peace we'd driven 3 hours to find. But when we finally crawled into the tent around 11, River followed us inside instead of sleeping by the fire like he usually did on camping trips. He curled up between me and the tent wall, close enough that I could feel his breathing. Luna wedged herself against my other side, her small body warm and solid. I was drifting towards sleep when River made a sound. Not quite a growl, not quite a whine. Through the tent fabric, I saw Curtis's flashlight click on, the beam sweeping across the clearing in slow arcs. "What is it?" I whispered. "Nothing. Thought I heard something." The light moved across the trees, paused, moved on. River's breathing had changed, faster and shallower. I reached down to stroke his head and his fur was standing up along his neck. "Probably just a deer," Curtis whispered, clicking off the light. River made that sound again, a low rumble that vibrated through his chest. I checked my watch. 11:47 p.m. The river rushed past our campsite, constant and unchanging. But underneath that white noise, I thought I heard something else. Footsteps, maybe, or branches breaking. I lay awake listening, counting the minutes on my watch face. 12:15, 12:33, 1:02. River would settle for a few minutes, then tense up again, his breathing quick and alert. Each time he stirred, I found myself holding my breath, straining to hear whatever had caught his attention. The privacy that had seemed romantic 12 hours ago now felt different. Heavier. We were completely cut off out here. No cell service, no neighbors, no help if something went wrong. The nearest town was 40 minutes away on mountain roads that would be treacherous in the dark. I rolled over and checked my watch again. 1:47 a.m. Only 4 more nights, I reminded myself. 4 more nights, and we'd be back in our apartment, back to normal life with its familiar sounds and reliable cell towers. River shifted against my side, and I felt him listening to something I couldn't hear. 4 more nights felt like a very long time. I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Curtis moving around outside. The tent fabric glowed pale orange in the early light, and my watch showed 6:23 a.m. River was already gone from beside me, which meant Curtis had let him out when he got up. I unzipped the tent flap and crawled outside, my joints stiff from sleeping on the ground. Curtis stood by our portable camp stove, holding his binoculars and staring across the river like he was watching a movie. "Morning," I said, stretching my back. "See anything interesting?" He handed me the binoculars without looking away. "There's someone on that ridge. Been standing there since I got up." I followed his pointing finger to a tree-covered slope about 200 yards away. Through the binoculars, I scanned the tree line until I found what he was talking about. A figure stood among the pines, perfectly motionless, facing our direction. Too far away to make out details, but definitely human-shaped. "How long have they been there?" I lowered the binoculars and tried to spot them with my naked eyes, but the distance was too great. "At least 10 minutes, maybe longer." Curtis poured coffee into 2 metal cups, just standing there, not moving at all. I raised the binoculars again, adjusting the focus. The ridge looked empty now. I swept left and right, checking every tree, every shadow. "They're gone." Curtis took the binoculars back and looked for himself. "That's weird. They were right there." "Maybe another camper? Someone checking us out before they set up nearby?" "Maybe." But Curtis didn't sound convinced. He kept the binoculars around his neck as we ate breakfast. Instant oatmeal that tasted like cardboard but filled our stomachs. River had wandered to the edge of camp where he stood with his nose pointed toward the woods, tail rigid. Every few seconds, he'd take a step forward, then stop like he'd hit an invisible barrier. "What's got into him?" Curtis asked. "I don't know. He's been weird since we got here." I called River over, but he ignored me. "River, come." He turned his head toward me, but didn't move his feet. His ears were pricked forward, focused on something I couldn't see or hear. After breakfast, Curtis started organizing our gear while I walked River along the riverbank. Or tried to walk him. He kept pulling toward the forest, his fur standing up along his spine. Every time I corrected his direction, he'd plant his feet and resist. "What is wrong with you?" I tugged the leash. "We're going this way." River whined and looked back toward the trees, then at me, then back at the trees. His whole body was tense, like he was fighting every instinct to bolt into the woods. "Fine. We'll go back." But even at camp, River wouldn't settle. He paced the perimeter of our clearing, stopping to stare into the forest at random spots. Curtis was securing our food in the bear-proof containers we'd rented, methodically checking each latch. "You think we should pack up?" I asked. "Head home early?" Curtis paused, a bag of trail mix in his hands. "Because of one person on a ridge? They're probably long gone by now." "It's not just that. River's acting strange, and this place feels... Feels what?" I couldn't finish the sentence because I didn't know how to explain it. The isolation that had seemed peaceful yesterday now felt heavy, like the mountains were pressing down on us. But saying that out loud would make me sound paranoid. "Nothing. You're right. Probably just another hiker." Curtis nodded and went back to packing food away. "Besides, we drove 3 hours to get here. I'm not letting one weird encounter ruin the whole trip." That afternoon, Curtis crawled into the tent for a nap while I sat by the fire ring, reading a book I'd brought. River had finally settled at my feet, though his ears still swiveled toward every sound. The forest was quiet except for the river and occasional bird calls. I was turning a page when movement caught my eye. Something had shifted in my peripheral vision, off to the left where the trees came closest to our camp. I looked up from my book but saw only pine trunks and shadows. River's head snapped toward the same spot, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "What is it, boy?" I stood and walked toward the trees, stopping about 20 feet from the forest edge. The shadows between the trunks seemed darker than they should be, but I couldn't see anything moving. "Hello?" I called out. "Anyone there?" No response, just the sound of wind in the branches, and Rivers continued growling behind me. I was turning back toward camp when I saw it, a flash of pale color ducking behind a thick pine, maybe 50 yards into the woods. Definitely not a deer or any other animal. The movement had been too quick, too deliberate. "Hey!" I shouted. "I can see you!" Still nothing. But River was on his feet now, hackles raised, staring at the exact spot where I'd seen the movement. I went to the tent and shook Curtis's shoulder through the fabric. "Curtis, wake up." He emerged, looking groggy and annoyed. "What's wrong?" "Someone's in the woods. I saw them duck behind a tree." That woke him up completely. "Where?" I pointed toward the pine where I'd seen the movement. Curtis grabbed his binoculars and studied the area for a full minute. "I don't see anyone. They're hiding, but they're there." Curtis lowered the binoculars and looked at me. "You sure it wasn't just shadows? Light playing tricks? I know what I saw." He was quiet for a moment, then walked to the truck and opened the driver's side door. From behind the seat, he pulled out his hunting rifle, a sleek black thing I'd seen him clean but never load. "What are you doing?" "Being careful." Curtis checked the rifle's action, then reached into the glove compartment for a box of ammunition. "If someone's watching us, I want them to know we're not helpless." I'd never seen Curtis load a gun before. His movements were practiced, confident, like he'd done this many times. The metallic sound of the bolt sliding home made my stomach tighten. "Maybe we should just leave," I said. "Pack up and find another campsite." Curtis slung the rifle over his shoulder. "We're not running away because someone might be in the woods. This is public land. We have as much right to be here as anyone else." But his hand stayed near the rifle's grip, and his eyes kept scanning the tree line. River pressed against my legs, still growling at shadows I couldn't see. The sun was starting to drop behind the mountains, and our peaceful camping trip was beginning to feel like something else entirely. I jolted awake to River's bark, cutting through the darkness like a blade. Not his usual warning bark. This was pure aggression, the sound he made when something threatened his pack. My watch glowed 2:47 a.m. "Curtis." I shook his shoulder, but he was already moving, reaching for the flashlight clipped to the tent wall. Through the orange fabric, a white light drifted between the trees about 30 feet away, not the yellow beam of a flashlight or the blue glow of a phone screen. This was pure white, bright enough to cast shadows through the tent walls, moving at a steady height like it was floating. "What the hell?" Curtis whispered. The light accompanied a sound I'd never heard before, rapid clicking like someone tapping a metal spoon against a tin can, but faster, mechanical, precise. River's barking got more frantic, and I grabbed his collar to keep him from charging out of the tent. Curtis reached for the rifle and started unzipping the tent flap. "Don't." I pulled him back down. "Just watch." The light moved in a perfect circle around our campsite, maintaining the same distance, the same height. The clicking grew louder as it passed closest to us. Not random noise, but patterns. Short bursts, then longer ones, then silence, then repetition, like Morse code, but more complex. Max and Luna crawled against my legs, their small bodies shaking. River strained against my grip, every muscle tense, his bark becoming hoarse from the effort. The light completed one circle, then another. On the third pass, it stopped directly across from our tent, maybe 25 feet away. The clicking intensified, faster now, overlapping patterns that hurt my ears. River went silent, which scared me more than his barking had. Then the light shot up the mountainside, moving faster than any person could run, faster than any vehicle could climb. The clicking faded with it, echoing off the rocks until the forest went quiet again. Curtis sat frozen, rifle across his knees, staring at the spot where the light had disappeared. "Drones?" he said finally, but his voice shook. "Has to be drones. Forest Service, maybe. Some kind of surveillance equipment. At 3 a.m, moving like that? Wildlife monitoring, they use all kinds of technology now." I wanted to believe him, but the clicking bothered me. That sound, it had patterns, like it was trying to communicate. Curtis looked at me in the dim glow of his flashlight. Communicate with who? I didn't have an answer that wouldn't sound crazy, but the repetitions had been too deliberate, too structured to be random mechanical noise. Something had been speaking, even if I couldn't understand the language. We didn't sleep. Curtis kept the rifle ready while I held River, who trembled against my side until dawn. Every rustle of wind through the trees made us both tense. Every normal forest sound seemed wrong now, like we were listening for something that didn't belong. When the first gray light filtered through the tent, I crawled outside to search the area where the light had been. The ground showed nothing. No footprints, no tire tracks, no disturbed leaves. If someone had been walking through those trees with equipment, they'd left no trace. "Find anything?" Curtis emerged from the tent, rifle still in his hands. "Nothing. Like no one was ever there." Curtis walked the perimeter of our camp, studying the ground with the intensity he usually reserved for debugging code. I checked on the dog's water and food, trying to establish some normal routine, when Curtis called out from near the truck. "Destiny, come look at this." Our cooler sat beside the truck exactly where we'd left it, but the bear-proof locks hung open. Not broken, just unlatched, like someone had known exactly how to work the mechanism. Curtis lifted the lid and I peered inside. Half our food was gone. All the meat, hot dogs, sandwich turkey, beef jerky, had vanished. But the bread, apples, and trail mix remained untouched, arranged exactly as we'd packed them. "Bears can't open these locks," Curtis said, lifting one of the metal clasps. "The whole point is that they can't figure out the mechanism." I studied the remaining food, and bears would have made a mess. This is too selective. Curtis closed the cooler and checked the locks again, working them open and shut. Someone came into our camp while we were sleeping, took our food, but only certain items. The thought of someone moving around our campsite while we slept, close enough to touch our tent, made my skin crawl. But the alternative, that the light and the missing food were connected, seemed impossible. "We should pack up," I said. "Head home today." Curtis looked toward the forest where the light had disappeared. Because someone stole hot dogs? Because everything about this place feels wrong. River's been acting strange since we got here. That person on the ridge yesterday, now this. I gestured at the cooler. Something's not right. Curtis was quiet for a long moment, weighing the rifle in his hands. Then he nodded. "After breakfast, we'll pack up and head out." But even as he agreed, I could see him studying the tree line, trying to solve a puzzle that didn't fit any logical framework he understood. The clicking sound echoed in my memory, too complex to be random, too purposeful to ignore. Something had been trying to communicate last night, and it knew we were here. The idea hit me around noon when Curtis was trying to fix our camp stove for the third time. We needed supplies anyway, more propane, fresh food to replace what had been stolen, maybe batteries for our flashlights. "I'm going to town," I announced, standing up from my camp chair. "We need stuff." Curtis looked up from the stove's stubborn burner. "What kind of stuff?" "Food. The good stuff got taken, remember?" I gestured toward our sad collection of remaining supplies. "And I want to ask around, see if anyone else has had problems in this area." "Ask around about what?" Mysterious lights and missing hot dogs? I could hear the skepticism in his voice, but underneath it was something else. Relief, maybe. The idea of leaving these woods, even temporarily, appealed to him too. About anything weird, break-ins at campsites, people acting strange. I grabbed the truck keys from the picnic table. You coming or staying? Curtis glanced toward the forest where we'd seen the light disappear. I'll come. Don't want to leave you driving these roads alone. The drive to Millbrook took 40 minutes on roads that twisted like someone had dropped spaghetti on a map. Curtis gripped the door handle every time we rounded a curve, and I couldn't blame him. The drop-offs were steep enough to make my palms sweat, and there were no guardrails, just painted lines and prayer. River rode in the back seat, nose pressed to the window, but he seemed calmer the farther we got from our campsite. His breathing had returned to normal, and he'd stopped that constant whimpering that had been driving me crazy since yesterday. Millbrook turned out to be the kind of place that existed because someone had built a gas station at a crossroads 50 years ago, and other businesses had sprouted around it like mushrooms. The general store sat next to a diner that looked like it hadn't updated its menu since the Carter administration. A few houses scattered up the hillsides, their yards full of rusted cars and wood piles. The store's bell jangled when we walked in, and a woman behind the counter looked up from her magazine. She was maybe 50, with gray hair pulled back and the kind of weathered hands that came from real work. Help you folks? Just need some supplies, I said, grabbing a basket. Camping up at Devil's Creek. Her expression changed. Not dramatically, but enough that I noticed. The friendly store clerk look got replaced by something more guarded. Devil's Creek, huh? She marked her place in the magazine and closed it. You folks been up there long? 2 days, planning to stay through the weekend. I picked up a package of hot dogs, trying to sound casual. Beautiful area, very private. Private's one word for it. The woman, her name tag said Denise, came around the counter. Mind me asking exactly where you're camped? Curtis had wandered toward the camping supplies, but I could tell he was listening. By the river, about 3 miles up the dirt road from where it branches off the main highway. Denise's face went completely still. That's Devil's Creek proper, right at the bend where the water pools up. That's right. You know it? I know it. She followed me as I moved through the aisles, her voice dropping lower. Locals don't camp there, haven't for years. I stopped pretending to shop and looked at her directly. Why not? Denise glanced toward Curtis, then back at me. You have any trouble up there? Anything unusual? The question hung in the air between us. I could lie, pretend everything was normal, keep our problems to ourselves. Or I could trust this woman who clearly knew something about our campsite. Someone's been watching us, I said finally. And last night, something took food from our cooler, opened the bear locks like they knew exactly how they worked. Denise nodded like this confirmed something she'd been thinking. 3 hikers went missing from that area 2 summers back. Search and rescue found one of them walking on the highway 3 days later, but he wasn't right. What do you mean, not right? Dehydrated, sunburned, talking nonsense about pale figures in the woods, said they made clicking sounds like insects, but louder, much louder. Denise picked up a can of beans from my basket, then put it back. Jeff Hall was his name. Good man, knew those mountains better than anyone. But after they found him, he kept going back up there, kept insisting something was living in those woods that shouldn't be. Curtis had drifted closer, pretending to examine a display of fishing lures. What happened to him? Family had him committed, said he was having a breakdown, couldn't stop talking about monsters. But I knew Jeff Hall for 20 years. He wasn't the type to make things up. Denise lowered her voice even more. He's been in that facility down in Riverside ever since, but sometimes he calls here, always asking if anyone else has reported strange things from Devil's Creek. My skin felt cold despite the store's warmth. Have they? Reported strange things? Not many people camp there anymore. Word gets around in a small community like this. But yeah, occasionally someone mentions lights in the woods, weird sounds. Most folks just pack up and leave. I thought about the clicking we'd heard, the mechanical precision of those patterns. The sounds Jeff described, did he say what they sounded like exactly? Like someone tapping metal against metal, but fast, real fast. And he said it came from different directions at once, like whatever was making it was coordinating with others. Denise studied my face. You heard something like that? Curtis stepped closer to us. Last night, something was circling our campsite with a bright light, making clicking sounds. Lasted about 20 minutes, then disappeared up the mountainside. Jesus. Denise shook her head. You need to pack up and leave. Today. Don't spend another night up there. We're planning to head out tomorrow morning, Curtis said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Not tomorrow. Today. Right now. Denise's tone had gone urgent. Whatever's up there, it's been getting bolder. Those 3 hikers that disappeared, they found their campsite torn apart, but no bodies, just blood and other things. What other things? Denise hesitated, then walked to the counter and pulled out a manila folder from underneath the register. I keep copies of the police reports, unofficial, but I know people in the sheriff's department. She opened the folder and showed us photographs. The campsite looked like a tornado had hit it. Tent shredded, gear scattered, cooler crushed flat. But what made my stomach turn were the marks in the dirt around the destroyed camp. Handprints, but wrong. The fingers were too long, with too many joints. They never released these photos to the public, Denise said. Didn't want to hurt tourism. But I've seen them, and I've heard Jeff Hall's stories enough times to know he wasn't making anything up. Curtis stared at the photographs, his face pale. These prints, they're not human. No, they're not. Denise closed the folder. Whatever's living up there, it's not natural. And it's territorial. I thought about River's behavior, his constant alertness, the way he'd been trying to lead us away from the woods since we arrived. Our dog's been acting strange, like he senses something we can't. Animals know. They always know first. Denise rang up our supplies, her movements quick and efficient. How much food you got left? Enough for tonight and tomorrow morning, if we're careful. Take extra. Don't cook anything that smells strong. And whatever you do, don't leave your campsite after dark. Not for any reason. Curtis paid for our supplies while I tried to process what we'd learned. The rational part of my mind wanted to dismiss Denise's warnings as local superstition, but the photographs were real. The missing hikers were real. And the clicking sounds we'd heard matched Jeff Hall's description exactly. One more thing, Denise said as we headed for the door. If you see lights in the woods tonight, don't investigate. Don't call out to them. Just stay put and wait for morning. The drive back felt longer than 40 minutes. Curtis missed our turnoff, and we drove for 20 minutes before realizing the GPS was showing us in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by forest with no roads marked. How did we miss it? Curtis pulled over and studied the GPS screen. We've driven this route twice now. Maybe we're farther out than we thought. I checked my phone, but we still had no signal. Let's backtrack to that last intersection. Curtis put the truck in reverse, but as we turned around, I saw movement in the trees, something white, keeping pace with us despite the fact that we were driving 30 miles per hour. Curtis, I pointed toward the forest. Look. He followed my gaze and hit the brakes. What the hell is that? The thing moved in jerky motions, like a film missing frames. 1 second, it was behind a tree. The next, it had covered 20 feet without seeming to move through the space between. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, and bone white, but the distance made details impossible. Drive, I said. Just drive. Curtis accelerated, but the thing kept pace effortlessly. It moved parallel to the road, appearing and disappearing between trees. always maintaining the same distance. River started whimpering in the back seat, that same distressed sound he'd been making at camp. Then it was gone, just vanished between one tree and the next. "Did you see?" Curtis started. "There," I pointed ahead. It stood in the middle of the road, maybe 50 yards in front of us. Curtis hit the brakes hard and we skidded to a stop 20 feet away. Through the windshield, I saw it clearly for the first time. 7 feet tall, with bone-white skin stretched over a skeletal frame. Its arms hung past its knees, too long for its body, ending in hands with fingers that had too many joints. Where its eyes should have been were black holes, deep and empty. It tilted its head at an unnatural angle, studying us. The movement was wrong, like its neck could rotate farther than human anatomy allowed. "Back up," I whispered. "Back up right now." Curtis threw the truck in reverse, but the thing started walking toward us. Not running, walking, but covering ground impossibly fast with those jerky, frame-skipping movements. "Go! Go! Go!" Curtis floored it in reverse, tires squealing on the asphalt. In the side mirror, I watched the thing reach the spot where we'd been stopped, then turn to follow us. But we were moving faster now, putting distance between us and whatever that was. We found our turnoff 5 minutes later, marked by the same wooden sign we'd passed twice before. Curtis took the dirt road too fast, bouncing over ruts and potholes, but neither of us complained. We just wanted to get back to camp, back to something familiar. But familiar didn't feel safe anymore. As we pulled into our clearing, I looked at our tent, our fire ring, our carefully organized supplies, and realized how exposed we were, how far from help. River jumped out of the truck and immediately started pacing the perimeter of camp, nose to the ground, hackles raised. He'd seen that thing too. He knew what it meant. Curtis sat in the driver's seat for a long moment after turning off the engine, his hands still gripping the steering wheel. "We're leaving," he said finally. "First thing in the morning, we're packing up and getting out of here." I nodded, but morning felt very far away. And as I looked toward the forest where the shadows were already growing longer, I wondered if we'd make it that long. The thing on the road stayed with me the entire drive back to camp. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those black holes where its eyes should have been. The way its head had tilted at that impossible angle. Curtis gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles had gone white, and neither of us spoke until we pulled into our clearing. "We need to pack up," I said the moment he turned off the engine. "Right now." Curtis checked his watch. "It's already 4:30. We'd be driving mountain roads in the dark. Better than staying here with those things. Those roads are dangerous enough in daylight. One wrong turn, and we're off a cliff." Curtis opened his door but kept one hand on the rifle. "We leave first thing in the morning, before sunrise." I wanted to argue, but he was right about the roads. We'd already gotten lost once today, and that was with decent visibility. In the dark, with whatever those creatures were potentially following us, we'd be just as trapped in the truck as we were here. River jumped out and immediately pressed against my legs, his whole body trembling. Not the excited energy he usually had after car rides. This was pure fear. He wouldn't move more than 2 feet from me, and every few seconds he'd whimper and look toward the forest. "At least help me get everything ready," I said, "so we can load up fast in the morning." Curtis nodded and started breaking down our camp chairs while I stuffed our sleeping bags into their sacks. We worked in tense silence, both of us jumping at every sound from the woods. Normal forest noises, birds settling for the night, wind in the branches, now felt like warnings. The sun dropped behind the mountains faster than I expected, and shadows stretched across our clearing like reaching fingers. Curtis had loaded his rifle and propped it against the picnic table within easy reach. Every few minutes, he'd stop what he was doing and scan the tree line. "I'm building the fire bigger tonight," he announced, gathering twice as much wood as usual. "Keep it burning all night." I didn't argue. The flames would give us light and maybe keep whatever was out there at a distance. Curtis stacked logs like he was building a fortress, creating a fire that would burn for hours without tending. We arranged our camp chairs with our backs to the flames, facing the darkness. River curled up between us, but his ears never stopped swiveling toward sounds I couldn't hear. His constant whimpering was getting on my nerves, but I couldn't blame him. Whatever he sensed out there had him more spooked than I'd ever seen him. That's when I heard it again. The clicking. It started soft, just a few rapid taps like someone drumming their fingers on metal. But within minutes, it had multiplied. Different rhythms from different directions, overlapping and responding to each other like some kind of conversation. "You hear that?" I whispered. Curtis nodded, his hand moving to the rifle. Same sound as last night. But this was more complex than what we'd heard before. The patterns had structure, repetitions that suggested meaning. One sequence from our left would finish, then another from our right would begin, like they were taking turns, talking. Through the trees, I caught glimpses of light. Not the single bright beam from last night, but multiple sources moving independently. I counted at least 4, maybe more, circling our camp at different distances. Some stayed close to the ground, others moved higher up, like they were in the branches. "Curtis!" My voice came out as a croak. "The lights." He followed my gaze and went completely still. The lights moved with purpose, coordinated, maintaining their spacing as they circled us. The clicking got louder, more urgent, like they were discussing what to do about us. The satellite phone rang. We both jumped like we'd been electrocuted. The phone sat on the picnic table, its shrill tone cutting through the forest sounds and the clicking. Curtis reached for it, but I grabbed his arm. "Don't answer it. It might be important." The clicking stopped. Complete silence except for the phone's insistent ringing and the crackle of our fire. Through the trees, the lights had stopped moving too, like whatever was out there was listening. Curtis picked up the phone. "Hello? Curtis." Thank God. Sadie's voice came through clearly, bright and normal and completely out of place in our current situation. "I've been trying to call for hours. How's the camping trip going?" Curtis looked at me, then toward the motionless lights in the forest. "It's fine. Good. Really good. Awesome. I'm so excited to join you guys tomorrow. I've got all my gear packed and the weather forecast looks perfect for hiking. What time should I head up?" I grabbed the phone from Curtis. "Sadie, don't come." "Destiny? What do you mean, don't come? We've been planning this for weeks. There's been a change of plans. We're leaving in the morning. Family emergency." "Oh no, is everyone okay? Do you need me to do anything?" I could hear the genuine concern in her voice, and it made lying to her even harder, but I couldn't explain what was really happening. She'd think we'd lost our minds. "Everyone's fine. Just something that came up suddenly. We'll reschedule when things calm down." "Are you sure? I could still drive up tonight, help you pack or whatever you need." "No!" The word came out sharper than I intended. "I mean, no, we've got it handled. Just stay home, okay?" There was a pause. "Destiny, you sound really stressed. Are you sure everything's all right?" "Everything's fine. I have to go now. We'll call you when we get home." I hung up before she could ask more questions. The moment the phone went silent, the clicking started again, but now all the sounds came from the same direction, like whatever had been spread out around us was gathering together. The lights converged too. 4 distinct sources moving through the trees, coming together about 20 yards from our camp. In the firelight, I could see shapes moving between the tree trunks. Tall shapes, wrong shapes. "Curtis." I barely breathed his name. 3 figures stepped out from behind the trees, just at the edge of our fire's glow. They stood perfectly still, watching us with those black holes where eyes should be. Their bone-white skin seemed to absorb the firelight rather than reflect it, and their arms hung past their knees like broken things. River pressed harder against my legs, his whimpering becoming a constant, low sound of terror. The creature in the center stepped forward. Its mouth opened wider than any human mouth could, revealing a dark cavity lined with something that looked like metal teeth. The clicking sound poured out of it, rapid and complex. Definitely some kind of communication. But the source wasn't its throat. The sound came from deeper inside, like it had organs we didn't. Curtis raised the rifle, and all three creatures tilted their heads at the same impossible angle, watching the weapon with what looked like curiosity rather than fear. "Don't move," Curtis whispered. "Don't run." But the creatures scattered anyway, moving with that jerky, frame-skipping speed that hurt to watch. 1 second they were standing together, the next they'd vanished into the darkness, but I could hear them moving through the branches above us, wood creaking under their weight as they repositioned themselves. I grabbed the truck keys from the picnic table. "We need to get to the truck." We'd never make it. Too much open ground. Curtis was right. 30 feet of clearing separated us from the vehicle, and those things moved faster than anything human. They'd be on us before we made it halfway. The clicking started again, coming from directly overhead now. I looked up and saw movement in the pine branches, pale shapes shifting against the dark sky. They were right above us, looking down at our fire, at us. River tried to bolt toward the truck, and it took all my strength to hold him back. His fear was overwhelming his training, and I didn't blame him. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, even though I knew Curtis was right about the distance. "What do they want?" I whispered. Curtis kept the rifle pointed up toward the branches. "I don't know, but they're not leaving." The creatures in the trees started clicking in unison now, a rapid-fire rhythm that seemed to build toward something, like they were counting down. I tightened my grip on River's collar and prepared for whatever came next. At midnight, the clicking stopped. The silence hit me like a physical weight. For the past hour, those rapid metallic conversations had been our soundtrack, coming from every direction around our camp. Now, nothing. Just the crackle of our fire and River's ragged breathing against my legs. "Why did they stop?" I whispered. Curtis swept his flashlight in slow arcs around our campsite, the beam barely penetrating the darkness beyond the trees. "I don't know." River strained against my grip on his collar, every muscle in his body coiled tight. He wanted to run, not toward the truck, but into the forest. His training was completely gone, replaced by something primal and desperate. Behind our tent, I heard breathing. Slow, measured, human rhythm but wrong somehow, like it was being done deliberately rather than automatically. I turned toward the sound, and Curtis's flashlight followed. The orange tent fabric glowed in the beam, but we could see the shadow of something pressed against it from the outside. Something tall enough that its head reached the tent's peak. Then it moved its hand against the fabric, and I saw the outline clearly. 5 fingers, but each one had too many joints, bending in places where human fingers couldn't bend. The hand traced along the tent wall like it was reading Braille, learning the shape of our shelter. Curtis raised the rifle. "Get away from there!" The hand went still for a moment, then pulled back. But I could hear movement all around us now. Footsteps that didn't quite sound like feet. Branches breaking under weight that shifted in unnatural ways. Curtis fired a warning shot into the air. The crack echoed off the mountainsides, coming back to us in waves. The response was immediate. Rapid clicking erupted from every direction at once, overlapping patterns that hurt my ears. Not just 3 or 4 sources now, dozens. They'd been watching us in silence, and the gunshot had triggered some kind of alarm. River broke free from my grip and bolted toward the truck. "River, no!" Luna and Max, who'd been huddled by the tent, saw him running and followed. All 3 dogs sprinted across the clearing toward the vehicle, their tags jingling in the darkness. I started after them, but Curtis grabbed my arm. "Don't!" Two pale shapes dropped from the trees directly in front of the dogs. Not climbed down or jumped, dropped, like they'd been hanging there waiting. Luna and Max yelped in pain as those twisted hands closed around them. Curtis's flashlight beam found them, and I saw one of the creatures hunched over each dog. The nearest one looked up at us, and its mouth opened wider than any human mouth could. Rows of needle-sharp teeth caught the light, metal bright and wrong. The clicking came faster now, almost rhythmic, like laughter. Curtis shot at the creature holding Luna. The bullet hit its shoulder and black liquid sprayed across the ground. The thing let out a sound like metal scraping glass, high and piercing. But it didn't let go. Instead, it snatched Luna up with one arm while the second creature seized Max. Both dogs were crying, high whimpers of pain and terror. River had made it to the truck and was throwing himself against the driver's side door, clawing at the metal. The creatures moved toward the forest, carrying Luna and Max like they weighed nothing. I could hear the dogs crying somewhere in the darkness, the sounds growing fainter with each second. "We have to help them." I lunged toward the trees, but Curtis caught me around the waist. "You can't. There's too many of them." River's barking had turned frantic. He knew what was happening to his packmates, and it was driving him wild. I could hear him throwing his body against the truck, desperate to get inside, to get away. Luna's cries cut off first. Then Max went quiet. The forest fell silent except for River's continued barking and the crackle of our fire. Then the clicking started again, closer now. Maybe 10 feet from the fire's glow, just beyond where our light reached. Curtis pulled me back toward the flames, rifle ready, but his hands were shaking. "They're gone," he said, and I could barely hear him. "Luna and Max are gone." The clicking grew louder, more insistent. Whatever those things were, they weren't finished with us. The clicking had been building for 20 minutes, growing from whispers to a metallic symphony that seemed to come from every tree around us. Curtis gripped his rifle so tight his knuckles had gone white, and River pressed against my legs like he was trying to crawl inside my skin. "We can't stay here," I said, watching pale shapes move between the trees just beyond our fire's reach. "They're getting closer." Curtis swept his flashlight across the tree line. 30 feet to the truck, they moved too fast. But sitting here wasn't working either. Every few minutes, another figure would step out of the darkness, stand at the edge of our firelight for a moment, then melt back into the shadows. They were studying us, learning us. I grabbed the truck keys from the picnic table and shoved them into my pocket. Our emergency bag sat beside the tent. Water, first aid kit, Curtis's backup phone charger, things we'd need if we made it out of here. "Cover me," I said, slinging the bag over my shoulder. "Destiny, no. We're going to die if we stay here." I looked at him across the fire. "They're not leaving, and there are more of them now than there were an hour ago." Curtis knew I was right. I could see it in his face, the way his eyes kept darting toward the truck. He was calculating distances and odds just like I was. River whined and pressed harder against my legs. He could sense what was coming. "On 3, Curtis said, raising the rifle. "Stay behind me. Run straight for the driver's side." I nodded, my heart hammering against my ribs. The truck looked impossibly far away in the darkness beyond our fire. 1. Something moved in the trees to our left. A flash of bone-white skin ducking behind a thick pine. 2. Curtis clicked off the rifle's safety. River's ears were flat against his head, his whole body coiled like a spring. 3. I ran. The first few steps felt like moving through water, my legs heavy with adrenaline and fear. But then training kicked in. All those years of hiking, of pushing through exhaustion on mountain trails. I found my rhythm and sprinted across the clearing. Curtis fired behind me, the crack of the rifle echoing off the mountainsides. Something in the forest screamed, a sound like metal scraping glass that made my teeth ache. River bounded alongside me, his paws silent on the pine needles. 15 feet from the truck. 10 feet. Movement in my peripheral vision. Something white dropping from the trees, moving with that jerky, frame-skipping speed that hurt to watch. Curtis fired again, and I heard a wet impact followed by that horrible metal scream, 5 feet from the truck. I fumbled for the keys, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped them. Behind me, Curtis shouted something I couldn't make out over the sound of my own breathing. The key slid into the lock just as something slammed into the side of the truck, rocking it on its springs. I yanked the door open and River leaped inside, scrambling across the bench seat. I dove in after him just as Curtis reached the passenger side. He threw himself through the door and slammed it shut. Something hit the window immediately, spiderwebbing the glass but not breaking through. Through the damaged windshield, I saw one of the creatures pressed against it, its face inches from mine. Up close, it was worse than I'd imagined. The black holes where its eyes should be seemed to go on forever, and its mouth hung open, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth that gleamed like metal. Its breath fogged the glass as it studied me with that tilted head, like it was memorizing my face. "Drive." Curtis shoved the rifle between his knees and grabbed my shoulder. "Drive now." I turned the key. The engine turned over once, twice, then caught. I threw it in drive and hit the gas. Nothing happened. The wheels spun, kicking up dirt and pine needles, but the truck didn't move forward. In the side mirror, I saw why. 2 creatures gripped the rear bumper, their unnatural strength holding us in place despite the engine's roar. "They're holding us," I said, my voice coming out higher than normal. Curtis rolled down his window and fired at the creatures behind us. The rifle's muzzle flash lit up their bone-white faces for a split second before they scattered. "Reverse!" he shouted. "Gun it in reverse!" I slammed the truck into reverse and floored it. We shot backward, and I felt something crunch under the tires. One of the creatures let out that metal-on-glass scream, but its grip broke. The moment we were free, I shifted to drive and tore down the dirt road. Our headlights swept across the forest, and I saw more pale figures emerging from between the trees. They reached for us with those twisted arms as we passed, their fingers scraping against the truck's paint. Something landed on the hood with a metallic thud. Through the windshield, I saw one of the creatures clinging to the metal. Its fingers punched through the hood like it was made of paper. Its black eye sockets stared at me through the glass, and its mouth opened in that impossible grin. "Tree!" Curtis pointed to a thick pine growing close to the road. "Scrape it off!" I yanked the wheel hard right, and the truck's passenger side scraped against the tree trunk. The creature held on for a moment, then the impact tore it loose. It tumbled into the darkness behind us, but I could hear it screaming even over the engine noise. The dirt road seemed to go on forever, full of potholes and ruts that made the truck bounce like a carnival ride. River had wedged himself against the back of the seat, whimpering with each impact. Curtis kept the rifle ready, watching the mirrors for pursuit. When we finally hit pavement, I was doing 60 and climbing. The truck's headlights swept across the yellow line as we took the first curve, and I forced myself to slow down. These mountain roads were dangerous enough without adding reckless speed to the mix. "Are they following us?" I checked the rearview mirror, but saw only darkness. Curtis twisted around to look through the rear window. "I see lights, maybe a mile back." I pressed harder on the gas pedal. The truck's engine whined as we climbed toward the ridge that would take us out of the valley. Behind us, the lights Curtis had spotted were gaining ground, moving faster than any vehicle should on these twisted roads. "How are they keeping up?" I took another curve too fast, tires squealing on the asphalt. "I don't know." Curtis's voice was tight. "Just drive. Get us out of here." The lights stayed with us for almost a mile, close enough that I could see them in my mirrors. Not the yellow glow of headlights, the same pure white illumination we'd seen circling our camp. They moved in formation, perfectly spaced, never falling behind despite our speed. Then, as we crested the ridge and started down the other side, they fell back. One by one, the lights stopped following and disappeared into the darkness behind us. River crawled into my lap, shaking so hard I could feel it through the steering wheel, I kept one hand on his head while I drove, feeling his rapid heartbeat against my palm. We didn't speak for the next 20 miles. What was there to say? That we'd just escaped from something that shouldn't exist? That whatever those things were, they'd been hunting us? Curtis finally broke the silence as we reached the main highway. We can't tell anyone about this. I knew he was right. Who would believe us? We'd sound like Jeff Hall, ranting about monsters in the woods, but I also knew we couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. They killed Luna and Max, I said quietly. Curtis nodded, staring out at the dark forest rushing past our windows. I know. River whimpered and pressed closer against me. He knew too. He'd lost his packmates to something unnatural, something wrong. And somehow I didn't think this was over. The lights might have stopped following us, but I had the feeling those creatures would remember our faces, remember our scent, remember where we lived. The fluorescent lights in the diner buzzed like angry insects, casting everything in harsh white that made Curtis look gray around the edges. We'd been driving for 3 hours without saying a word, just River's constant whimpering from the back seat filling the silence between us. Coffee? The waitress appeared beside our booth, pot in hand like she'd materialized from thin air. Curtis nodded without looking up from his hands. I wanted to tell her we were fine, that we didn't need anything, but my throat felt raw and I couldn't make the words come out right. The coffee tasted like burnt water, but it was warm and normal and human. I wrapped my fingers around the mug and tried to pretend we were just tired travelers stopping for a late meal, not people running from something that shouldn't exist. Curtis kept glancing toward the windows, checking the parking lot where our truck sat under the security lights. The passenger side was scraped raw from where we'd hit that tree, and there were dents in the hood where fingers had punched through metal like it was paper. We should eat something, he said finally. Neither of us had touched food since yesterday morning, but the thought of eating made my stomach turn. I ordered toast anyway, something safe and bland that might stay down. The bathroom felt like a sanctuary. 4 walls, a lock on the door, fluorescent lights that kept the shadows at bay. I splashed cold water on my face and called Sadie. "Destiny, how was the rest of your trip? Did you guys work out whatever emergency? Don't go to Devil's Creek." The words came out harder than I'd intended. "Promise me you won't go up there." "What? Why would I go up there? You said you left because of a family thing." I closed my eyes and tried to think of something that would sound believable. "There was an incident. Someone got hurt. The area's not safe right now." "Oh my God, are you okay? Was it a bear attack or something?" "Something like that. Just promise me you won't go camping there. Ever." Okay, I promise. You're kind of freaking me out here." "Are you sure you're all right?" "I'm fine. We're fine. I have to go." I hung up before she could ask more questions and stared at myself in the mirror. My reflection looked hollow, like someone had scooped out everything behind my eyes. There was a scratch on my neck I didn't remember getting, 3 thin lines that looked almost like claw marks. Back at the table, Curtis was staring at his untouched eggs like they might start moving. "We need to report this," he said when I sat down. "Report what? That we were attacked by monsters? People are missing, those hikers Denise mentioned. If there's something dangerous in those woods, they'll think we're crazy, just like Jeff Hall." I pushed my toast around the plate. "You want to end up in a psychiatric facility, telling doctors about pale creatures with metal teeth?" Curtis was quiet for a long moment. "So, we just do nothing? Let other people walk into that? What choice do we have?" He didn't answer, but I could see him working through the problem like he worked through code, looking for logical solutions to something that defied logic entirely. The drive home took another hour. River had finally stopped whimpering, but now he just lay in the back seat like a broken thing, staring at nothing. Every few minutes, He'd let out a soft whine that cut right through me. Our apartment building looked exactly the same as when we'd left 4 days ago, but walking up those familiar stairs felt like entering someone else's life. The hallway smelled like cooking and cleaning products instead of pine trees and mountain air. Normal smells that should have been comforting, but felt alien now. Inside, I went straight to the bathroom and turned the shower as hot as it would go. I scrubbed my skin until it was red and raw, washed my hair 3 times, but I couldn't get clean. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those black holes where eyes should have been, heard that metallic clicking that sounded almost like laughter. When I finally came out, Curtis was sitting on the couch with his laptop, typing furiously. River lay in his bed by the window, but his head was up, ears alert, like he was listening for something. "What are you doing?" "Research." Curtis didn't look up from the screen. Missing persons reports from that area. Geological surveys. Anything that might explain what we saw. I pulled on clean clothes and sat beside him. The laptop screen showed a map of the mountains around Devil's Creek, marked with red dots. Too many red dots. 17 people in the last 10 years, Curtis said. All in roughly the same area. Some were found, some weren't. The ones they found were like Jeff Hall. Dehydrated, incoherent, talking about things in the woods. And the ones they didn't find? Just gone. Search teams found torn campsites, blood, but no bodies. I thought about Luna and Max, how quickly those things had taken them, how their cries had cut off so suddenly. We should have tried harder to save them. Curtis closed the laptop and looked at me. There was nothing we could have done. You saw how fast those things moved. But knowing that didn't make the guilt any easier. River had lost his pack mates, and we'd run. It was the smart choice, the only choice, but it still felt like abandonment. I checked my jacket pocket for my phone and felt something wet. When I pulled my hand out, my fingers were stained black. The same dark liquid that had sprayed from the creature Curtis shot. "Curtis." I held up my hand. This was on my jacket. He stared at the black stain. "From when I shot that thing, it got blood on you." The liquid didn't smell like blood. It smelled like metal and something else. Something organic and wrong. I went to the kitchen sink and scrubbed my hands until the skin was raw, but I could still smell it. "I'm burning this jacket." Curtis didn't argue. We went down to the apartment complex's communal fire pit, and I fed the jacket to the flames piece by piece. The fabric burned wrong, too fast, with smoke that made my eyes water. When it was gone, I felt slightly better, but not clean. Not really. River wouldn't eat dinner. I put his food bowl down, and he just looked at it like he'd forgotten what food was for. When I tried to coax him, he turned away and pressed his face against the wall. "He's grieving," I told Curtis. "Dogs form pack bonds. Losing Max and Luna, it's like losing family." Curtis nodded, but I could see him watching River with the same worried expression he'd been wearing since we left the mountains, like he was waiting for something else to go wrong. That night, I lay in bed listening to Curtis breathe beside me, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time I started to drift off, I heard clicking sounds in the walls, rapid metallic conversations that might have been the building settling or might have been something else entirely. I got up and checked on River. He was awake in his bed, staring toward the window with his ears pricked forward. When he saw me, he whined softly and looked back at the glass like he was trying to tell me something. "What is it, boy?" I pulled back the curtain and looked out at the parking lot. Empty except for our scraped truck and a few other cars under the security lights. Nothing moving, nothing wrong. But River kept staring, his whole body tense. I was about to go back to bed when I saw them. Scratches in the brick wall outside our window, 3 parallel lines scored deep into the masonry. Too high for any person to reach without a ladder, and too precise to be accidental damage. I let the curtain fall and backed away from the window. River whined again, and this time I heard what he was trying to tell me. They know where we live. 2 weeks passed before I could sleep through the night. Curtis installed new locks on the door, deadbolts that required keys from both sides. He bought a security system with cameras and motion sensors, spent hours programming it like he was building a fortress instead of monitoring an apartment. We never talked about what happened, not directly, but I caught him checking the windows after dark, saw him keep the rifle within reach when he watched TV. He'd researched missing persons cases until his eyes were red, printed out maps and police reports that he kept in a folder he thought I didn't know about. I looked up Jeff Hall online, found news articles about his breakdown, interviews with family members who insisted he'd been normal before that camping trip. There was a photo of him from before, smiling, healthy, holding a fish he'd caught on some mountain lake. He looked like Curtis, like me, like someone who'd never hurt anyone or made up stories for attention. The clicking sounds came back in my dreams, not every night, but often enough that I started drinking coffee after dinner, anything to stay awake a little longer. Curtis noticed but didn't comment. He had his own ways of avoiding sleep. River still wouldn't eat properly. The vet found nothing wrong with him physically, but I knew what the problem was. He was waiting for Max and Luna to come home, listening for their tags jingling in the hallway, their paws on the stairs. Some nights I caught him staring at their empty beds, whimpering so softly I could barely hear it. "He's depressed," I told Curtis one morning, watching River ignore his breakfast again. "Dogs can have PTSD just like people." Curtis looked up from his laptop where he'd been reading another missing persons report. Maybe we should get him a companion. Another dog. But I knew it wouldn't help. River didn't want a new pack mate. He wanted his old ones back, the ones we'd failed to protect. The scratches on the building wall had been painted over by maintenance, but I knew they were still there underneath the fresh paint. Sometimes I'd catch River staring at that spot, his ears forward like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. 3 weeks after we came home, I found myself checking missing persons websites, looking for patterns. Hikers who'd disappeared along the route we'd driven home. Campers who'd vanished from sites between Devil's Creek and the city. I didn't find anything. Not yet. But I kept looking, because some part of me knew this wasn't over. Those things had seen our faces, learned our scent. They'd taken Luna and Max, but they'd let us escape. That felt less like mercy and more like a choice. Like they'd decided we were more useful alive than dead. I just didn't know why yet. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, jolting me from the kind of deep sleep I'd only recently learned to trust again. Curtis grabbed the phone before I was fully awake, his voice groggy with confusion. "Hello?" I rolled over and checked the caller ID. Unknown number with a mountain area code that made my stomach drop. "This is Denise Hart from the general store in Millbrook." The woman's voice carried clearly through the phone, tight with something that might have been fear. "I need to speak with Destiny Moore." Curtis handed me the phone, his face already alert in that way that meant trouble. I sat up, suddenly wide awake. "This is Destiny. I'm sorry to call so late, but I didn't know who else to contact. You remember Jeff Hall, the man I told you about?" My mouth went dry. The hiker who went missing. "He broke out of the facility 3 days ago, came straight back here to Devil's Creek." Denise's voice shook. "Search and rescue found him yesterday morning, but he's not good. Covered in that black substance again, barely coherent." Curtis leaned closer, trying to hear both sides of the conversation. I put the phone on speaker. Before he stopped talking completely, he gave me a message. Said it was for the couple with the dogs who got away. "That's you, isn't it?" I looked at Curtis, saw my own dread reflected in his face. "What did he say?" "Those things you encountered. They're not from the woods. They live underground, in the old copper mine tunnels that run beneath the mountain. Jeff found their nest years ago, went down into the mine somehow. Said there were hundreds of them in the dark." The room felt suddenly cold. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders, but it didn't help. He said they marked him during that first encounter. That's why he kept going back, why he couldn't stay away. They always knew where he was, could track him no matter how far he ran. The facility couldn't keep him because something was calling him back. "Why are you telling us this?" Curtis asked. Denise was quiet for a moment. "Because Jeff said they've been following your scent trail. 3 families have disappeared from campgrounds along the route you drove home that night. The pattern's moving closer to the city, closer to you." My hands started shaking. I gripped the phone tighter, trying to keep my voice steady. "What families?" "The Hendersons, about 40 miles from Devil's Creek. Found their campsite torn apart, just like those hikers from 2 summers back. Then the Williams family, maybe 20 miles closer to the city. Last week, the Kowalskis vanished from a state park only 60 miles from where you live." Curtis was already out of bed, moving toward his laptop. "Same MO? Destroyed campsites, blood, but no bodies. And witnesses at nearby sites reported strange lights in the woods, clicking sounds that lasted for hours." Denise paused. "Jeff said they're hunting you, following your trail home." I thought about the scratches on our building wall, the way River had been acting lately. More alert, more anxious, like he was waiting for something terrible to happen. "How long do we have?" "I don't know. But Jeff seemed to think they were close. Real close." Curtis had his laptop open, fingers flying over the keyboard. "I'm looking up those missing families now." "There's something else," Denise said. "Jeff mentioned the copper mines specifically. Said that's where they came from originally, back when the mountain was being excavated. Something about the mining operations disturbing things that should have stayed buried. How do we stop them?" "I don't think you can. Jeff tried for years, but maybe you can run far enough, fast enough, get somewhere they can't follow." Curtis looked up from his screen. "The news reports match what she's saying. 3 families, all along our route home, all within the last month." A sound from the living room made us both freeze. River's low growl, the kind he made when something was seriously wrong. "I have to go," I whispered to Denise. "Be careful. And if you see Jeff again, don't trust him completely. Whatever those things did to him down in those tunnels, it changed him. He's trying to help, but he's not entirely himself anymore." I hung up and followed Curtis toward the living room. River stood at the window, hackles raised, staring through the blinds with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Curtis grabbed his rifle from the closet while I crept toward the window. Through the gap in the blinds, I could see the apartment parking lot bathed in yellow security light. Empty cars, familiar shadows, nothing out of place. Then I saw it. A figure stood beside the dumpster, maybe 50 yards from our building. Tall and perfectly still, like a statue someone had placed in the parking lot. Even at this distance, I could see the unnatural length of its arms, the way its head tilted at that impossible angle. "Curtis." I barely breathed his name. He moved beside me, rifle ready, and looked through the blinds. Jesus Christ. The thing stood there for maybe 30 seconds, motionless except for that tilted head slowly turning in our direction, like it was listening, searching. Then it was gone, not walking away, just gone, like it had never been there at all. River's growling intensified, and he pawed at the window like he wanted to get outside, to chase whatever had been watching us. "Pack the emergency bags," Curtis said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "We leave in 10 minutes." I was already moving toward the bedroom, grabbing the go bags we'd prepared weeks ago. Clothes, cash, documents, everything we'd need to disappear for a while. Curtis loaded extra ammunition while I threw River's food and leash into a separate bag. "Where are we going?" "Your parents' place. It's 4 states away. Should buy us some time to figure this out." But even as he said it, I could hear the doubt in his voice. Jeff Hall had run too, and they'd found him anyway. Marked him somehow, made it impossible for him to escape. I was zipping up the last bag when I heard it. Faint, but unmistakable. the clicking sound that had haunted my dreams for 3 months. Not coming from outside this time, but from somewhere in the walls themselves. Rapid, metallic conversations that seemed to echo through the building's structure. Curtis heard it too. His face went pale, and he shouldered the rifle. "They're here." River's barking turned frantic, and I grabbed his leash with shaking hands. The clicking was getting louder, more complex, coming from multiple directions at once. Like they were coordinating, planning something. We made it to the truck in under 5 minutes, throwing bags in the back while River paced anxiously in the cab. Curtis started the engine, and we pulled out of the parking lot with our headlights off, trying not to draw attention. But as we reached the street, I looked back at our building and saw them. 3 pale figures standing on the roof, perfectly motionless, watching us drive away. One of them raised its arm in what might have been a wave, or a promise. Curtis drove through the night while I watched the mirrors, looking for lights that moved too fast, for shapes that didn't belong on empty highways. River curled up between us, whimpering softly, like he knew we were running from something that couldn't be outrun. The clicking sounds had stopped, but I could still hear them in my memory, patient, persistent, getting closer with each passing day. Jeff Hall had tried to warn people for years, and it had driven him insane. Now we were carrying the same burden, the same terrible knowledge that no one would believe. Somewhere behind us, in the tunnels beneath Devil's Creek, hundreds of pale figures were stirring, following a scent trail that led straight to us no matter how far we ran. And I had the sinking feeling that running was exactly what they wanted us to do.